So with that, I hope you have a really good 2 days with us. This is the only event that we're aware of this kind of nature in the country and in the continent. And we'd hope you to come and join us in this conversation as we go forward. So with that, the housekeeping is done. So I'm going to go into opening it for us and setting a bit of stage and mood for this conversation. As a reminder, everything we're covering, you've received a book, a little bookie like this. So if you get lost or if you're confused or you want to know more, please refer to your bookie. We will follow that as best we can. So, when we say BIM, we don't always know we don't always have the same definition. But I thought it would be helpful to take a very, very, very big picture perspective on what it is that we're doing when we're working in the digital world. Because our legacy as built environment professionals, whether you're an architect, an engineer, a property owner, a government, a municipality, or a bridge maker, your legacy is building, making things in the built environment. And in the big picture of making things in the built environment, we have to see what kind of world are we building. There's 100 billion buildings in the world today, of all types and all sizes. There's 10 times more buildings than there are human beings in this world. This is from huts to high-rises. And the vast majority of these buildings are in Asia and Africa. In the next 18 months, the building stock, just buildings, not roads, not bridges, not dams, not anything else, buildings, will be 183 billion square meters in the next 12 to 18 months. That's 100 times more people than people. Cities represent only 3% of the Earth's surface. Yet cities, built environment, us, makers of buildings and cities, we're responsible for 75% of energy and climate issues. 3% is responsible for 75%. And this is today. In Africa, our urban population will urbanize with a 90% increase to urban contexts. And we will add 1.3 billion people, a doubling of our population, to our cities in Africa. There will be an 80% expansion of city-making activities on this continent, more so than any other continent. We will have a doubling of building stock very soon in our lifetime. And I'm not including any infrastructural works, just numbers of buildings that we can count. By 2050, we have to have the vision of 2050. Because in the global picture, by 2050, most of our buildings will already be built in the world. They will already exist. And sure, we can design better buildings, we can make more energy efficient buildings with new stock, but most of our buildings will already exist when we inherit them and work with them. So even though we have to prioritize new build better, the upgrading of buildings and the maintenance of buildings and the life of buildings beyond your career is going to be more important than anything else. But that's the global picture. In Africa, this situation is reversed. It's completely inverted. In Africa, our smaller cities will double in size every 20 years. In other words, the amount of time it takes a child to finish school, cities will double in this continent. So in Africa, our situation is completely the opposite of the global general situation. 80% of our building stock is yet to be constructed. And this is the world you're entering in when you're a young person or a beginner in the built environment. You're entering into this world. And we have to ask ourselves, what is our legacy in building going to be? If you do napkin math, and if you're in my classes, you know I'm very bad at math, but I love doing napkin math. If you take the average process of making and designing and building a building, let's do silly math. Let's call it 3 years of thinking about it and getting the money, planning the thing. And let's call it 3 years for building the building and designing and building and delivering the thing. That takes, and if you say an average building lasts about 100 years, which they do, typically 100 years, you can make napkin math and say, well, designing and making a building is about 6% of the life of that building, generally speaking. And this 6% is both the physical and informational work and the effort we put into making buildings that last hundreds of years. That means 94% of this effort of making a life of a building is actually in using that thing. The building's life is 94% after design and construction. The physical and informational effort is grossly more weighted to using that building than making that building. And usually in design and construction and built environment, we think the 6% matters more than the 94%. And if you take that big perspective and you see what Africa needs to do in the next half century, and we ask ourselves, what are we busy with in design and construction? I think it's important to say, what are we handing over in design and construction? And I think for us, in the built environment, we have to ask one question. Where does our effort really go to? What are we spending our time on when we do work in the built environment? What do we do every day? Now, the average employee, never mind built environment, spends at least 2.5 hours a day looking for stuff, if you're lucky. The average employee spends over 8 hours a week, if you're lucky. That's more than a 1 work day per week, per person, looking for stuff. And in some industries, it's much more, and in our industry, it is mostly the job is looking for stuff. That's 25%, if you're lucky, of all your productive effort and time and energy that you spend looking for stuff. And in the bigger picture of what Africa is going to see and what the world needs, is this number good enough? Is that what you want to spend time doing for the rest of your life in your productive, active world? This impacts the built environment tremendously. At the global scale, it costs us $280 billion a year on reworking bad information and mistakes and decisions and finding things out. 35% of our time is spent on non-productive activities that matter nothing, and we pay for it extremely expensive costs. And all of the effort that we do, because we are so bad at information management, 96% of all effort of design and construction, data, information, decisions, and histories, we throw away, and that's 6% of making and building a building. And when we have to use and the 94% of living in that building, using that building, the rest of the building's life, where all the effort should be, we have to redo everything again. Because we don't pay attention to the information of our decisions as we pass things along. Now, today is not the day to go into the details of what these impacts are, but if you're a professional, you've felt this pain. If you're a person who sits in an office, if you've designed and built a building, if you're running a company, if you're working in a city, you know that the cost of missing information is way more expensive than just money and time. It costs us people's energy. It costs more than just money. But money matters because we need to live in this world. So the cost of the construction and the data dilemma is something that we actually can pay attention to and fix. And if we look at the market and the future of Africa, we have the most interesting opportunity to put attention on this thing, because we are starting from scratch. We are starting all on this continent as beginners, in building the cities of Africa. And this is a wonderful opportunity that the rest of the world simply doesn't have. So with this, we want to ask you, young, mature, whatever you are in your experience of the built environment, whatever your role is, whatever your discipline is, where are you going to put your effort to for the next 100 years? And how do you want to spend your time? And what legacy are you going to hand over to someone else? Buildings and roads and bridges outlast us all. The most historic buildings are thousands of years old and they're still there. And so it goes. So when we say BIM Harambee, it's helpful to understand what Harambee means. Harambee means to pull together as one. It's a Swahili word that says we are in one boat, we are rowing together, we're one community pulling together. And in Harambee as a community, we are all here as volunteers. We're all here from very different backgrounds and disciplines. But we recognize that if we don't pull together as one African built environment community, what are we spending our time on at all? And Harambee is about that, is finding out as beginners, as a community, how are we going to build the cities of Africa, and how are we going to do this with the opportunity that is in front of us. So in BIM Community Africa, and we're all members of it, and we invite you to become a member of it, it's completely free, it's completely voluntary. We say, before we take, we must culture. And what is the culture of BIM Community Africa? And what is the culture that we want in the built environment? The number one thing for us is leave your badge at the door. Your title, your story, your ego, doesn't matter. Leave your title and your badge at the door. Come up to the community as a beginner and contribute. Do something good for someone else. Your work isn't about you. It's about serving someone else. And in this community, in the 100 years of making building, every time you make a building, you have to think of a century or more. How are you doing something good for someone else with the work that you're doing? And how are you going to take care of the future? Because it's not just about you. And this is the culture of our community, and that's why we sit here together. That's why we Harambee together, and that's why we are talking about BIM together. So in BIM, the culture of BIM is that before you do anything in BIM, you ask why. Why do we want to work together? How do we want to work together? And what and who are we working together for? This is how we start all BIM projects, and we're going to now slowly transition into a workflow to show the beginners in the room how BIM projects are set up. And we'll go into in little bits of details, and we will take this culture and purpose into this workflow for you. When we design BIM Harambee, and there you are, you can see the community working on BIM Harambee, we also design with this culture in mind to what is the purpose of designing this event. Before we Harambee, we have to ask why. Why, how, and what, and who are we BIMing or Harambeing for? And we figured out, before we even lifted a pen to paper, started any process, that we, as a community, are doing this so that we can talk about BIM in Africa, so we can learn how to practice BIM together in Africa, that we can demonstrate good and better ways to work in the built environment, which is a very broken environment otherwise, and that we can get new people, young, mature, experienced beginners, no matter what, to start practicing in new ways in Africa. That's why we are Harambeing for. And in this discussion, we also learned that there's a lot of mistakes we make, there's a lot of misunderstandings we have, but most importantly, that BIM is not a technology, it is not a thing, it's not a button, it's a way of working together that is fundamentally new or different than historical practices. BIM, even though we're talking about buildings, in the word, is actually about better information management, not just modeling stuff. And that it's a way of service. It's a way of servicing information and handing over information to someone new and taking care of that person in the process. And our job as a community is to make sure that we create a culture that is BIMing well in Africa, because we have a lot of work to do. We have to find process-driven and collaborative ways to do that. And this is why we Harambe, to pull together and figure it out. So we design this environment together. This is this year's BIM Harambe. And we asked ourselves, from last year to this year, what is most important to people in this conference? How do we produce the most value together? And how do we serve others? What do we keep doing, stop doing, and continue to do? And this year we said, what most people really want to need, more than definitions, is to meet the people who do the job, to understand the role, and understand the business of BIM. And this is the theme of this year's conference, that our goal is never to show you how to perfectly BIM. This is not the goal. You can learn that in many other places. But we are here to support you in adopting BIM behaviors, in BIM culture, in your own professional career or in your organization or in your project, and make sure that you are able to achieve what you want to achieve in a new way that is more sensible and collaborative than before. So with that, we're going to start our first simulation, which is our project workflow stages. And I'm going to hand over to Richard Matchett, from the digital lead from Zatari, to kick us off.
Thanks, Calayde. Good morning. We've been looking forward to this for a long time, and I'm sure you have as well. So just a quick show of hands. Who was at the Harambe last year? Great. I'm going to do the obvious and say who was not at Harambe last year. All right, those of you who didn't stick up your hands, you're obviously suffering from memory loss. So what we're going to do is run through a simulation to give us all a bit of context of how the process of working in digital delivery, in this process called BIM, how it actually works, and we're doing a small simulation to demonstrate that. We're basing it on a process that, for some of you, would be familiar. These are the RIBA stages of work. And most projects that we do in the built environment follow the sequence of doing, where we start off with processes that are involved in getting ready for development, getting our strategic definition and briefing ready. Then we continue on into the design preparation, collecting all the materials that we need to do the design well, making sure we've got a good basis for it, thinking about how we're going to make things fit together, and we think about that before we actually end up in a mess. And then going into the design process, so starting to do the actual math and science, the drawings, the models, creating the artifacts that then get handed over for construction. And then after construction, a very important step, which is closing out the project and collecting all the useful information that has been developed over the course of the project and making sure that it's handed over in a format that's useful for the people who've actually got to create value in that 94% of the building's life. And then, very important, that last stage is realizing that in that 100 years or more lifespan of the building, we've got to look after it. And sometimes buildings get older than 100 years. And how do we recognize that? How do we preserve? How do we look after? And again, use the processes for that. So in terms of the players that play in this process, we've got a tag team over here. And so you're going to need to pay attention to this slide because it's not going to come up again, but in your mind, you're going to need to refer back to it. So in that strategic definition, we're going to hear about how do we define outcomes and what does that process look like? Then before we get going, we've got to put a plan together. Without a plan, you're heading for failure. Any project manager will tell you that. And it's no different in the delivery in a digital way in BIM. Then we need to collect information, and the basis of design, what we have as a reference point. Modern technology has given us incredible opportunities to collect the physical world into the virtual world, and we'll see a little bit about how that happens, and tomorrow we'll learn more. Then we go through concept design, and what does it look like to almost do a pencil sketch, but in the digital world, and how does that then flow through into the subsequent stages. But that pencil sketch can't just be someone's crazy idea. It actually needs to fit It's got to fit into the real world, it's got to fit into existing buildings, and it's got to ultimately continue to fit as we do the design process. And as we go through design, we got to continuously check that things still fit. So words like clash detection start becoming very important, and coordination become very important. Then it comes a chance to get a contractor on board, they tender for the work, they build it, and there are technologies involved once again to continue adding valuable information into that data set. So we collect information during construction. In essence, we're not just building bricks and mortar, we're also building a digital version of that product. That gets handed over and then gets used. And we're going to hear about some of the technologies and ways that software enables us to manage our facilities well and to manage the information that describe how our facilities perform. And on the basis of the history that we accumulate in the digital world, we're also able to modify, improve, and reuse buildings all the way through to their end of life. And ultimately, there's a few incredible examples in this city actually where we are demolishing buildings and big questions are being asked about how do we reuse, how do we make sense of tons and tons of material that we're removing. Would there be a better way to manage that information about the materials and to use them better in circularity? So that's what we're going to attempt to do. And my team over here are going to take us step by step. So they're going to jump up and down and each take a speaking turn. Keep this picture in mind as you think about how we're actually going through this process. So when we start a project as a company, you need to think about a few things. Number one, you're going to need a team. I've got a team. Each of us in our individual companies have teams, but we're also working together between companies. Sometimes we're in forced marriages where we get told we're going to work together, and so we need to form team. We're also going to talk about culture. Then we need plans. We need to know who's going to do what. So often on projects we see that we roll up our sleeves and we jump in and we get going, and then somebody says, "Where's the plan?" "Oh, sorry, I didn't actually think about the need to plan, so I didn't plan, so we're just going to try and get it done." And that usually ends up in a bit of a mess. Because we're working in a digital environment, we need workflows. And so, quite simply, a workflow is a step-by-step recipe on how you go from zero to hero. And because we work in very complicated computer environments, we need to know how information is going to flow between people, and also how that information needs to flow between computer programs. And how do you import and output information from the different softwares that you use? When you're talking to the clever people outside with the stands, ask them questions about workflow and about information exchange. They'd really love to talk about that with you. And you also need lots of technology. There's also great examples outside about that and how we use that technology. Not everybody needs to own everything, but in the team, you've got to have some people that have got the right tools to do certain parts of the job. So as we go through this tag team process, I challenge you, think back about team, think about workflows, think about processes, think about technology and how we use those. So, first up, we need the client to come and tell us the strategic definition. Do you want me to take your book?
Yes, thanks. I'm back. So, in my former life, I sinned as an architect, but now I am a client. And I am the owner of a building. It's called the Bouwkunde, or the Department of Architecture building. And I, as a client, have problems with my building. I'm not going to mention them here. But I would really like to make this building better. I'm the head of department, I own the project, I'm the capital asset manager of the university, whatever my title is. But I'm the owner of the building, I'm the client in the old way of saying things. But I'm a client who wants to do a BIM project. And as a client who's starting in a BIM project, I have to really adopt BIM culture and behavior. And I don't just issue instructions. I don't start at stage 1, I start at stage 0. And stage 0 is something that only exists in BIM. And stage 0 is before we do anything at all, we ask why are we BIMing and what are we BIMing for? We call that strategic definition of the project works. So as a client, my team and I are talking with everyone very lightheartedly. We have not signed any deals. We haven't started the job. But we're asking ourselves, what are we doing and what kind of a client do I want to be so that I can make sure my team is successful in BIM? So for me, it means that I have to learn things. I have to learn things about what they need, what they can and cannot do, and so that I scope and brief a project that is achievable for people involved. I also need to learn things that I'm probably not used to before and adopt standards and practices that are maybe new to me in my organization. But a good client does those kinds of things in stage 0 because it doesn't help I spec a project that cannot be done. So in stage 0, as a client, I have wants and needs. And I define this as my owner's project requirements. This is bigger than a brief. A traditional brief is just, I want. But an owner's project requirements is also, I understand what I need to do with this building and this project, more so than just, I want. This is the job of the client and the owner. I have to define things for myself, which is, in the case of my building, I want to upgrade architecture building beyond what it is today. And in my case, I need to understand that the product that I want is to upgrade the life and utility of this building for much longer than what it is today. I need to not just paint it a different color, I need 200 years extra life on this project. And the reason I'm doing it is more than just painting it red or blue. It is that I know that this building is an educational building for architects, and there's future generations of teachers and students who need to be better equipped in my building. So my purpose for my project is more than just painting and breaking walls and adding new doors. It is a higher order purpose, and that's what I define for myself as an owner in stage 0. But with my team, I also talk about what do we want out of this project. What do we want as a team? And we discussed as a team that we want to learn how to practice new skills and technologies together. We want to achieve the owner's project requirements, and we want to learn how to become better team members and better skilled professionals. So it's not just for the project, but it's also for us, and we discuss what kinds of skills we would like to try out and what we are working for in this BIM project. We also acknowledge that stuff we do in the past is not necessarily helpful to us, and there could be many, many improvements we can bring along in this project, and we can iron out these improvements early on and start improving not just the project, but also ourselves by doing the work. So for us as Architecture 5.0, our OPR, our owner's project requirements, are both of these things. The product of making a better building and the process of leveling up in making a better building. And as an owner, that's what I make sure that we have agreement and consensus and that deep cultural intent on our project. This is fundamentally different than doing traditional design and construction. In traditional design and construction, I issue my brief. But in BIM design and construction, we create a brief. It's fundamentally different. So let's look at the practical stuff. This is the building. Right now it's a 4-story building and a half a basement, so to speak. And for Architecture 5.0, as a client, I want certain things. And I have constraints on my project. You might know this constraint. It's called, I have a very limited budget. I'm sorry, can we just check this clicker? Very limited budget, very common constraint in the built environment. And there are certain things that I need to achieve with this building. First of all, we decided that we will not mess up the world, so we won't build another building. We have lots of reasons for that, and we've discussed it to death, that we as a team will not build new buildings. It must be really awesome for my students and teachers to be in that space. And it must be definitely, we must make sure that good learning takes place. That's what I want as a client. It must be way cooler than the engineering 4 building. Way, way cooler, because I'm an architect and I can't deal with the engineers having a cooler building than me. So, very important. And after all this discussion, not a pen was lifted to paper. We've not drawn a drawing, we've not done a budget, we've done nothing. We've agreed what kind of a project we want together. And we agreed that the most sensible thing is probably to add 2 floors to the top of the existing structure after we've evaluated it. This is very good for everybody. So the project is put all the cool new labs on top of and all the workshops and the environments and exciting spaces on top while upgrading the building. Thank you very much. And make sure that there's a lot of creative space for my learners and teachers to work on novel built environment, inspire them when they're working in this building together. And we have a lot of stuff that we do in our architecture school. We have the timber chair, living walls, flexible facades, future cities, circularity, and digital environments. And all of this must be placed and accommodated for in our building. We want that. Make this building a living laboratory for the built environment. So with that in mind, I go into the BIM. That's the definition, the culture, and the purpose of our project. This is very different to traditional design and construction because we came up with it together. We actually did do this together, so I'm not just speaking for myself. Now I'm going into the BIM process of articulating exactly what I mean when we are speccing this project. And there are 4 core ideas in the BIM standards when you spec projects like this. We call them the OIR, A, B, and EIRs. Organizational information needs, requirements, asset information needs, project information needs, and employer peopling information needs. All of this information is part of BIM projects. This is very different to traditional design and construction, which only focuses on the product of making stuff. So in your BIM books and on our resources on the website, there's a lot of detail on this. I'm just going to mention what they are so that you have a bit of context. So a BIM OIR, an organizational information requirement, means what information do we need from the building and the design process, what we're all doing our effort and work on, to make sure that we make good and effective decisions, reporting, and planning. That's what that part of the document really means. And we work together to establish those definitions as a team. You can see that as what is the to-do list for me as a client and what essential information we need to share and distribute amongst each other. The next big definition that we set up together is what is the asset information requirements that this building and its design process needs. Assets are not always physical things only. It's often informational or abstract things are also assets. And in that, we want to say, what do we want? We begin with the end in mind. At the end of this project, what valuable things are we capturing, holding on, and passing on to each other? The next big idea is the project, doing the actual work, the project itself. How are we going to communicate with each other? Who needs things when, where, and how? How would they like to receive information? So we don't just throw things over the fence like we do in traditional design and construction. We first ask about how we want to work together before we do anything at all. This is fundamentally different than conventional design and construction delivery. And finally, the employer, which I represent right now, how will we as a team, including myself, produce reliable information so that we can make decisions, costing and procurement and planning, execute well? And these things we all set up in the stage 0 definitional stage before we even do any work at all. So what it looks like is we go through a process similar to this. We plan out the whole project conceptually from 0 to finish the digital twin in this case. We figure out who is going to come in where in this theater of design and construction. We figure out how information could be handed over at a conceptual level. We make sure that we can and are capable of giving each other information. We make sure that we look ahead to the full completion of the job before we even lift the pen to paper, and that we actually understand what work we're doing. This is fundamentally different to traditional design and construction, where we just do stuff as we go along. That's why BIM has a stage 0, and that's why the owner, which I'm representing today, is so important in establishing culture and purpose in information management about buildings. How do we produce value for others, and how do we make sure we serve each other well? That is a BIM project. So with this stage 0 complete, we are now ready to enter stage 1. And we will go through each stages in a very high level to just give you a simulation of that workflow experience as we finish our project.
All right, so I'm doing the coordination around here. So the next, if you go back to that bubble picture in your minds, was the prep and briefing stage. So in this stage, we're going to first of all have a look at that planning process. So taking all of the employer's requirements and what they have stated they want. Machiel, you can come up, and then putting that down in a plan. After that, you guys can just come up directly after that. We're going to start collecting the information that we're going to need to form a basis of the planning, of the physical solution, and make sure that we've got a really good reference. Machiel, go for it.
Can I get the clicker? Okay, so we got all this nice documentation created, and it becomes quite admin activity to kind of read through that. But to kind of decipher that information into something more tangible, something we can work with, we kind of create a BIM execution plan. Now, the easiest way to kind of understand a BIM execution plan is basically your how-to guide, your playbook. How are we, as a team, going to deliver this project to the client's requirements at the end of the day? And we capture a lot of information in here, from how we're going to share models, how we're going to put them together, how we're going to break them apart, because our buildings might become very complex, large in scale, to how are we going to coordinate these elements together, from clash detection to asset information to ultimately getting information to site, even possibly how the contractor will use this information on site. And this becomes really the cornerstone for the production work of getting to the deliverables at the end. Yeah, that's a simple way of explaining what a BIM execution plan is.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's it. Okay, great. My name is Wiam Labuschagne. I come from a company called Somserve Instruments, and today I'm going to take a few minutes of your time just to explain the importance of accurate geospatial information. So what is geospatial information and why is it important? Geospatial information is the concept of the whole Earth having coordinates in latitude and longitude. And today here in this hall, you've already made use of a latitude and a longitude, and I will prove it to you. Can you guys please help me to get and locate seat M30? It will require some action. Can you guys look for seat M30? Look at... Have you guys located seam M30? Okay, where is M? Where is row M? Can we locate row M? Okay. What is your number there at the back? What seat are you sitting at? Your seat number. Can you see? Just look next to your seat, there's a number. Sorry? 33. Okay, so 30 is either 3 seats that way or that way. Okay, great. Okay, so we kind of know now where sheet M30 is. So how we located that was using M as the latitude and 30 as the longitude. We kind of did not locate that, but anyways. All right, yeah, so, and I'm going to show you a bit more relevant way, maybe, to help you understand my latitude and longitude explanation a bit better. So, let's say we want to go from Tux to the city center of Johannesburg. How would you guys get there? Yes, it's a bit far. Can you just repeat that? Okay, so we'll use Google Maps, Waze. Have you heard of that? A great tool, nah? Okay, so that actually uses your latitude and longitude coordinates from point A to point B, and it plans your route accordingly. But that's just, let's say, that is geospatial information in its most inaccurate form. Okay, so, and that brings me to my next point. Relative accuracy versus absolute accuracy. So, relative accuracy is when you have built a building or you designed a building with the correct features, the seats, everything looking really, really beautiful, and you're super proud of it. You want to take it to your lecturer, your parents, and you're so excited, and you go show it to them, and they say, oh, that looks so beautiful. Look at this bridge line. It's amazing. Can you just export that into Google Earth so that we can have a look at this beautiful design? And the moment you click that export button, it plots in the middle of the desert or in the middle of the ocean. And that kind of is a bit humiliating, right? All right, so that is relative accuracy. Even though your design was spot on, your location was incorrect. And that brings me to my next point, which is absolute accuracy. That takes your design and actually plots it in the 100% correct position, which means you now know your measurements in the real world as well as the correct location. All right. So, as part of this, now that we know that we can accurately position a building, how do we revisit the same point, the same position over and over again? We do this by establishing accurate site control. Accurate site control gives us either it's a reference station, a beacon, something to refer back to with exact Y, X, and Z coordinates. This is essential to plot your buildings over and over on the exact same spot. All right, so that's why we use accurate site control, so that when the surveyor gets on site, he says the building corner is here, and the engineer gets on site, and he says, no, the building corner is here. We use accurate site control to avoid those discussions. All right, great. Yeah, they all know about it. All right, so, and that's why accurate site control is so important. So, but obtaining this information is used by certain instruments. And on the screen you can see we use instruments such as drones, GNSS receivers, LiDAR scanners. All of these instruments help us to be accurate when we actually either execute or when we measure the let's say the land before we go into the design phase. So all of this information can be gained here outside in the lobby. If you want to know more of the different types of technologies that we do have, please come speak to us, and yeah, us and our team is there, and we can even give you a bit of a tutorial on how to use a GNSS receiver. Thank you. Ooh, I think I went too far.
Right, how's it? Can I get that thing? How's it? Louis de Klerk, I'm from Zutari, civil engineer, these days looking after reality capture. And yeah, part of this process to get this building going, so as Calayde said, as the client, she wants to reuse our old building, so obviously we need to know what's there. And this process of collecting that information, we call this reality capture, and basically we digitize the real world by using technology and software. And these 3D reality twins then become the base of our information. So what is used in the industry for a lot of people, it's that tape measure. But we've kind of changed the way we do things these days, and we use a range of technologies. And the different companies have different software packages, they've got different technologies, but in the end, it's not specifically which brand you use, but it's how you use it, and are you using the right tool for the job. If you had to do a lab, for instance, where the absolute accuracy, like Wiam has described, is critically important, you would use a high-density stationary scanner that's got a millimeter accuracy. If you just need more or less the features, where are the walls, doors, windows, those kind of things, then a SLAM or a movable scanner that's got a 10 millimeter accuracy would be good enough for that kind of job. So there's a whole range of tools and that we use for this. So the basis of all of this, and all of us that is in the industry can tell you that the critical point is that base control, that base point where everybody coordinates everything around. In the BIM execution plan part, Machiel mentioned the coordination part, the clash detection part. So if all of us jump and start modeling somewhere on some random coordinate, when we try and put that information together, it won't fit. The things will be out of place. It will look like there's clashes. When we get to site, things will not look as what we expect. So everything we do, we start with accurate geospatial information. Where's the rest of the slides? So that's I jumped again. A critical one. The rest of the part that we'll do is normally photogrammetry. So putting drones in the air, that is the quickest way for us to understand the lay of the land. So if we take again an old building, flying a drone over there for half an hour and taking photos in a structured way with control, we can process that data and immediately see what features are there. There's solar panels we need to take into consideration, the condition of the building. So we can collect all of those external features. The step after that would be taking a 3D scanner and walking through a building. So if you have to imagine measuring up this event hall with all of the woodwork and the curvatures and the seats and the slopes and everything that's here, and I gave you a tape measure and a clipboard, you would be busy for quite a while. Scanning an event hall like this, we can do this in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and we'll have everything visible to your eyes, we'll have captured, which will be in relative accuracy, 100% accurate, and if we added some control points outside the door, we'll get absolute accuracy in this part, which means that internal data will sit inside that shell that the drone creates for us. So we've got the internal and the external information. And all of this gives us the opportunity to then take that information and share it. So if we work with specialists that might be designing one of the labs for Calayde that's sitting in another country, we can share that information through one of the cloud platforms and they've got immediately access to it. It's not a scanned document that's skewed and out of proportion. We can bring, once we start with the construction, we can scan again and we can compare that scan data to what is done in the model side of things, and we can see, is things being constructed in the right place? Is everything there? During these phases, we'll also use things, and Jaco will talk us through, as 360 cameras to collect that kind of information. And all of this brings the site to the office. It gives us accurate information to work with. Everybody works on the same information. And that's the basics of reality capture, is really capturing what's out there, bringing it into the office, and having a baseline of accurate information for this BIM process. And so those of you that's here tomorrow we'll do a live demo of the processes, what the data looks like, using some of the buildings here on campus and others. So let's see you tomorrow.
So, now we've got base information. Who of you have never seen a point cloud before? I'm quite interested. Please stick up your hands. There's a couple. So it's one of those things that people talk about a lot and you pretend like you know what they're talking about, but you're like, yeah, I've never seen one of these things before. Who of you have seen a 3D mesh? You can be honest. Okay, those of you who haven't put your hand up, we'll show you some of these things tomorrow. But essentially, you know those movies where it's like those high-tech spy movies where they create this 3D model and they can see through the building and they can see where the goodies and the baddies are and they can trace where you've got to go. That's kind of what engineering and architecture is doing these days, and it's seriously fun. And it's adding a lot of value to us being able to understand what a building looks like inside out and see, how does this space relate to what's on the roof, and be able to slice through a building. It's really, really cool. Okay, so now we've got our information. Now we need to say, okay, cool, we've been collecting stuff. What do we actually want to do? And so this is where we start having a look at our concept design. And so in this next stage, we're then going to see, okay, what's a mock-up of this look like and what might it become? Go for it.
Morning, everybody. My name is Willem Viviers. I'm from a company called TotalCAD Solution Center. I'm the regional representative, and we distribute a suite of Graphisoft products mainly for architectural designers called ArchiCAD, DDS CAD, BIM Cloud and BIMX. So focusing on this stage 2, starting off, we use the BIM Cloud, which is majority being used as a way of communicating in the architectural team, but can also be used as a common data environment. But for this example, we're just using it as a communication tool within the architectural team. So it allows us to work hybrid, being able to collaborate regardless of where we are, the size of the project, or the location, of course. As well as being a BIM cloud or a cloud-related software, we have automatic backups and that sort of thing, so we've got some assurance in terms of the work that we do. Then the ArchiCAD is used as a BIM authoring tool. There are obviously many others to use, and ArchiCAD supporting an open BIM approach, which we'll talk about in the rest of the stages as well. So for coordination and collaboration, the model specifically we use, as the BIM execution plan said, in this case, IFC format, which is an open standard, and that is just a format that we have decided to communicate back and forth regardless of which discipline. So everybody will be receiving IFC format files as well as sending out IFC format files. So looking at the project that we're doing is the Bokende building. There's obviously quite a lot of things that's involved in the project in the concept stage, so we'll just focus on a couple of things and highlight a few features. So obviously, as mentioned, we've got the scans that's been done, and from the scans and other existing information that was available and shared with the team, we constructed an IFC model, which you can see on screen there. That's the Bokende building before any construction at the moment. Then by using certain tools, for in this example, we have the renovation tool where we differentiate between the existing to be demolished information and very easily be able to communicate the after demolition model with the rest of the team, as well as while planning the rest of the building. So just by identifying the addition at the two top floors, as the client mentioned, just in masses we define these, and then we can perform certain feasibility studies like sun studies and that sort of thing. We also use the new AI visualizer, as I'm sure a lot of you might know that AI is blowing up. So for having more design iterations, it helps using this tool to get a lot more options that we can provide to the client instead of having to physically build models that we can produce to the client, and that usually didn't have a lot of options. With this tool, it allows us to make a lot more informed decisions as well from the very get. We also perform things like energy analysis to make sure that the building will perform according to requirements. That's obviously quite important in the beginning of the project. So then, after we've gone through a lot of designing and that sort of thing, Jaco will also mention a little bit more that the whole project, we're constantly exchanging information. The BIM execution plan will define exactly when this information exchange happens, and it happens at all certain intervals between all the different stakeholders, including the client. So IFC that we mentioned before is where we communicate models back and forth. So we've got an architectural model, we've got a MEP model, a structural model, and so forth. We also have another format called BCF, which is basically used for communicating changes. So once we've received those IFC formats or models from all the various disciplines, we also need to communicate what changes need to happen. So also on a bigger picture, the project level, there's coordination, change coordination, but this is just an example of what it could look like in terms of a federated model. So this is, as you can see on screen at the bottom, it indicates a federated IFC model, which is purely just the architectural, the site, structural, and MEP models that's been put in together into one model to view and to do certain checks. Once those checks are done, we are then communicating all the information back to the relevant parties in BCF format. So it's just a very simple way of communicating. You can even attach a screenshot and it will take them to that exact specific place, even whatever message is there. So it's very easy to communicate changes required on the project. Jaco will also tell you a little bit more about this, but this is an open BIM approach. Regardless of the software you use, we can still communicate, and I think that's the key here. Right, so once we've created a federated model, obviously on project level it happens, but also as an architectural team, we also import all the various disciplines to do certain things like collision detection, shows you where certain elements colliding, and then you can deal with that accordingly. Then also, while all the information is exchanged, we can also use something like a model comparison, which will clearly indicate all the new information that was deleted, as well as that's been modified, to just graphically see where things have changed. Right, so other than those two formats that I mentioned that we communicate within the team, we also have a product called BIMX. This is used to communicate the model, but also 2D documentations in one platform, and this is usually done with a client in the beginning, but this can also be used once we've finished with the planning the process and we get to construction. So even the guy on site could have this model on his phone, on his tablet, or a computer, which has got quick access to all the documentation related to the project, as well as the 3D. It's just nice to being able to see how everything fits together. Right, so that was the approved concept, and I'd like to invite you to our stand and come and have a look at how this BIMX works. We've got some VR goggles there if you'd like to have a look at that as well, and stand a chance to win some cool prizes. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. If you can click on one next. So now we've got a wonderful picture. The picture is based on science, it's based on spatial analysis, it's based on energy analysis, and on this project we used an open BIM approach. Other projects might use something that's more centered around one particular type of software. But the important part I think that you need to take away is that as all of those activities were being done, the team needed to consistently look at the developing process. They had to continuously check back and see, are we still agreeing with what's going on? One of the great things about working in a digital delivery environment is that you're not pitching up, well, hopefully, we're not pitching up at meetings with rolls of paper under our arms and then putting all these pieces of paper on tables and then taking turns going around the table, you know, getting dumped on because your stuff doesn't fit with the other people's stuff. The whole idea with working in this digital environment is that we can put our models into the same place. And so part of that planning that we did in the BIM execution planning, the way that we actually then execute, the way we put everything on a single point, I hope you're getting this picture of when you coordinate from the beginning, you can continuously check back and see, does it still fit? Is it still working? And Jaco's going to take us through a little bit about what that looks like.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. It's nice to be back in this room. In the last century I was in the stage, but I had to face that way and my attire was different. Okay. It's good to be here and help educate. So what the community is doing is we literally rising the tide and educating. So Jaco Barnard from a company called Agile Business Technology. We're a software consultancy based in Stellenbosch. I'm really enjoying the weather up here at the moment. And we represent a couple of international software companies. Whoops, that's not me. In the building information modeling world. So there's a lot of concepts, there's a lot of acronyms, TLAs being introduced. They're all very important. You know, so we've spoken about building execution plan, the employee information requirements, and a very important concept within the BIM project is the notion of a common data environment. Okay, so the name is quite self-explanatory, and it's not really something that only kicks in at the stage. At stage 3, where we're doing the coordination, it actually has been there all along. Okay, so right at the beginning of the project, there might only be feasibility studies, there might be environmental impact assessments. That is all the information we need to control in a central place. So when we do a BIM project, and if we do it properly, we're not going to opt for Dropbox, Google Drive to share information. Ideally, we would like something that works across all these platforms, and that is what a common data environment does. Catenda is one of those. There are many common data environments available, and it's pretty much horses for courses. You know, so there's not single tool. What is unique maybe about this class of common data environments is that they are open BIM. So what open BIM is, it shouldn't be confused with open source. It really is just a platform that helps us to execute, be on the same page, regardless of what tools were used previously. So when Willem represented there, ArchiCAD was in place. We could have projects where there's Revit in play, there's ArchiCAD, there's Tekla, all these sort of authoring tools that people are used to make models need to come together, and the only way we can do that is to start embracing open BIM standards. Willem spoke about IFC, it's Industry Foundation Class, and it's really sort of a standard that can be understood by everybody, but most importantly, post-handover, think of an IFC file as a PDF document equivalent, or the equivalent to a PDF that was extracted from a Word document. So if I open that document in 20 years' time, I will still be able to open it even if I don't have Word on my PC. So this is really what a common data environment provides to the team. And as I said, it is something that isn't used, plugged in, and then taken away from the project. It really plays a role right from the design phase, construction phase, you know, linking everybody together into operation phase, demolition, renovation, and also in terms of smart buildings. You know, once we've got these IFC files out there, this is what we will use to run, operate this building for that 94% of the life cycle or the lifespan of that building. Okay? So once again, just an example, there's Catenda Hub, which is really our CDE. There's a site component to it, so we need people on site to be able to look at the information we've got. And what Catenda does, it is that digital twin of the building itself. So just again, same story. What this does, it keeps everybody on the same digital page. Okay? So it's a common data environment, and effectively we can operate these projects. We make use of IFCs and we make use of BCF. So BCF is BIM collaboration format, ensuring that the architect using ArchiCAD can communicate with the engineer on Tekla and maybe the electrical engineer on Revit. So we don't need to use the same tools, but we can still collaborate and speak to one another. So we've got a stand out there if you want to learn more about what this is, how does it fit into BIM projects. Please come and talk to us. Okay, so just lastly, for more information, buildingsmart.org, okay, is really something you should go and visit. There's a lot of information there that will help educate you around BIM, but it's also the international organization that sets these standards. Okay, so if we want to standardize, there's an international body that determines what these standards look like. It's not just for buildings. There's IFC 4.3 for civil works, etc., etc. So infrastructure is there, but you'll get to learn a lot more about this concepts at buildingsmart.org, just as sort of a indication in terms of the evolution of BIM in other countries. So if in Dubai you would like to submit building plans, paper is not accepted. They want an IFC model of the building, and that is the only deliverable that can be submitted if you want to go and build something in Dubai. So please visit those resources for more information, or you can get in contact with us as well at Agile. And that's my story. Okay, there is a customer success story. You can find that on the Katenda website. This is a project in Mozambique, and it was a global project with the team scattered all around the world. Okay, so effectively sponsored by the United Nations, and what they had to go and do during the war, a lot of that infrastructure was destroyed. It had to be rebuilt, and that was a sponsored project by, as I say, by the World Bank. And on that project specifically, there was Revit in play by the guys in South America. There were other guys using ArchiCAD, and the only way that project could be properly coordinated was to actually move into an open BIM environment. But go and read about that, and or come and ask us questions about that. I think that is it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jaco. So at this stage of the project, we've done a lot of work. We've got a concept that works. We've got a concept that the client likes. We've put all the information in a place where everyone's been working together. But now we need to go deeper, right? Because it's one thing to design the shape of the building and where the rooms are going to be and what it's going to look like. It's a different thing to design how we're actually going to bolt stuff into the ground and how steel is going to connect to steel and how we're going to make all of the details buildable. So next we go into the technical design, and that's going to involve a lot of math, a lot of modeling, and also a lot of fitting together. Big button.
How's it, guys? My name is Nathan York. We're from York Brothers Construction. We specialize in going from company to company that are struggling with some of their BIM stuff, and we assist with all the technical side of things. So moving from there. On stage 4, and this is where most of this architecture guys will get involved. Stage 4 is where everything really starts coming together, where we've already paid for the survey to be done, and now we really get stuck into the hard graft. This slide will be up on all of them, so we can go through it a little bit quicker. So preparing the documents for local authorities. This is where council starts getting involved. So at the moment, up until stage 3, it's all been fun and games and no one knows what we're building until when I really decide, the client says, I'm happy, let's go ahead. Council wants to know. So we've got to do some technical stuff. The architect made a pretty building, but the structural engineer is going to make it stand. And this is where things get really, really, really technical. Okay. So here's a couple of pile cap designs, and Wait Services decides, hang on, wait, I know I've only got 2 toilets in this building, but it's important. So can you just move those last 2 columns and then away we can go. All right. Then the rest of the guys say, oh, well, you're giving some preferential attention to the wet services. Fire guy comes in, mechanical guys come in, and lastly the yellow guys, the electrical. It's not going to work. Now we get really, really technical, okay? So all these guys are coming together and it's professional. Some guys, like mentioned by Jaco, so electrical engineers working on Revit, the architect's been working in ArchiCAD all along, mechanicals working in something else. Tekla, structural guys are working in Trimble and whatever. So all of these teams need to come together, and as we go along, the period of time needed to dedicate to this, because we can knock up the concept in, let's say, a week, and the client says they're happy. But this is where the bulk of the work is going to be. This is where you're going to start taking a month or 2 months to get your designs. It's going to be intense meetings. And those meetings can be minimized by all the softwares where we can actually start sharing those platforms. And if there is someone who's decided to work at 8 o'clock at night, he doesn't need to phone his colleague that's in the team. He can actually just go onto his CDE, which is a common data environment, and just log in. There's no paper trails, we're not wasting money on this, and we're also not wasting time. Is it that way? Die ding is nou dood. It's gone past. That's te vinnig. Come on. One back. One back. It's gonna jump. Anyways, so moving on from there, the last part of this one in 4.1, because stage 4 is so important, we split it into 2. Now we've decided, we've already paid the architects for their concepts and stuff. This is what the client wants to build, and we're just about to get the yellow machines on site. Now we want to check the Medibas one last time. How many RONs is this thing going to cost? And then, we've got all the millions. How long is it going to take? So that's where every single discipline will put his little project plan together in the greater scheme of it all. And put it all together, we say, this is the overall project plan, and this is how long it's going to take. All right. And then we put it all together. So sure, we finally got through the toughest part of 4.1. But we like it so much, we're all going to do it again. This clicker doesn't work. 4.2, the tender, the design. So after 4.1, we get into the second part. We get to do it all again. But this time, we're going to do it with a bit of finesse. All right? 4.2 is basically the construction documentation, so we can proceed and call for tenders. So no one knows that this project is happening yet, and so much work has gone into it. Using all the BIM tools that we can, we've eliminated major clashes, eliminated major cost overruns, and because we're using BIM tools, we can do it so much more efficiently and have sufficient workflows, minimizing costs, and this is what BIM has come to the table with. Calayde mentioned earlier where some of the overruns are up to 20%, 30%, and that's just construction wastage, and we can minimize that using all our BIM tools. All right, now we start getting into council submissions. Council says they're happy to see this thing get built, and we start getting all the final technical details out. So at the moment we've just worked with concepts, now we've got dimensions. And then we come back to where Louis was speaking and the guys were speaking about X marks the spot, the reality of the coordinates and exactly where we need to construct this thing. And then we go into that. Okay, and then this is where the QSs come in. So this is where we really start working completely as a team. So the QSs and the client, we start putting our tender documentation together, and we've called for tenders. So this whole building is going to cost, contractor A says he's going to do it for 100 million. Contractor B and C, they're in contention, 105 and 95. But what did it call for? So we've got all the tenders back, and we say, okay, but what did contractor A, B, and C actually price for? And we asked for apples and pears. We got it across the board, but it looks like there's been a few changes. At last minute, the client might have said, okay, well, hang on, we actually want a balcony extra so that we can put all the smokers out there. And contractor C actually decided, well, he's going to put a bunch of bananas in his basket as well, and he wins the award. And then after that, project gets concluded. So we draw up all the contracts, and we put everything together, and everyone knows exactly what they're going to build, and off we go. All right. We will be hanging around a bit, so you can bump into me and ask all the BIM questions you want. So details are up there. Do I go to the next slide?
Yep.
Cool.
So, exciting stuff. We're about to break ground. We're about to start building now. And now we're entering the final straight of this creation of the asset. We've gone through everything up until now has been in the office. It's all been virtual. It's some of the projects that we worked on in the past. You've got an architect sitting in Mexico. You've got structural designers sitting in Pretoria. You've got the MEP guys sitting somewhere else in the world. And because of everything we've described, we're able to work efficiently together on our computers, but working in a common data environment, getting the details sorted out, sorting out the costing, the quality, getting to a point of appointing the contractor. So in the next session, we're going to have a look at, okay, how do we then use technology to continue managing that information through the construction process and get to that position of handover. All right, Jaco, back to you.
I think I need another hand, but I'm not going to put on the hat. So I have introduced myself, and basically, how many of you have got a 360-degree camera? Anybody? Okay. Those AV people do, as we would expect. Okay. So, open space, think Google Street View for projects. It's that simple. Why do we deploy this? Well, hopefully this project, and definitely our project here, we had a QS there with a vision, and they have provided for us to make use of open space on that specific project, okay? Because if the QS didn't do that, we can have a problem, because everybody's going to want and need this, and we're going to go, who's going to pay for it, okay? So if the QSs provide for these type of tools, it does make the life a lot more easy for everybody. So what does open space do? On projects, normally site documentation, progress tracking is done through mobile phones. Okay, so people would go to a job site, they would take 100 photos of the progress on the day, and they will share that with the wider team and basically put it on a WhatsApp group. Now, it's not very useful because I will not be able to find a specific photo in 2 weeks' time, let alone in 10 years' time when the owner of that asset is trying to ascertain what happened during the installation behind that wall, okay? So the way it works is I walk on the job site with that hard hat or with the camera on my head, and I make my own Google Street View, okay? So I can do split views, I can look back, because I'm building up this time machine, and effectively what this does, it keeps everybody on the same visual page, okay? So not all the consultants do need to go to site all the time. If there are issues to resolve, that footage could have been taken by the contractor on site, inviting the architect and the engineer in, and visually we can resolve that issue quite quickly, okay? We can also make use of comparison to the BIM model, okay, because we are working in a BIM project here. We've got a BIM model available in the hands of the contractor now, okay, because it's very important for us to never forget that other C, okay, so there's always client, consultants, contractors. Contractors form part of this process, so they need to get access to these models, and they need to use them in the best possible way, because even though we've done all the clash detection up front, there will still be issues when they physically start to install or construct on site. So what this does, it basically starts to compare a 3D model with the actual as built or as we're busy building. What the platform can do as well is it can start overlaying to see whether a certain BIM element will fit into the space, and once again, better coordination with with the site. We can also start doing very basic 3D scanning. So should the person on site have access to a mobile device with a built-in LiDAR scanner, we can scan a specific object and we can start measuring. So typically in construction, we need to ensure there's enough clearances. Somebody goes to site, that doesn't look correct. Well, get a ladder and go measure it. Or alternatively, pull out your phone, take a LiDAR scan of it, and somebody remotely can go and measure from that. You do need a smartphone with a built-in LiDAR scanner. At this stage, you can only find those in iOS devices. So if you've got an iPhone Pro or an iPad Pro, that would be able to do the scan and upload into the platform once again. That's just an example of the bouwkunde building in terms of comparing what was built to an IFC model on the right-hand side there.
So Jaco, just go back to that picture there, because this is actually quite incredible. What we're seeing over there, you took that photograph on the left in the building, and then the model on the right is actually what we used for the concept design.
Yes.
And so right now we've actually got a digital twin of what is there, and then that gets used as a basis for coordinating and designing. It's incredible.
Yeah. So if you come to our stand, come and speak to us or the Baker Baines people. They are the resellers of Open Space. It is quite incredible because not everybody on a project would be sort of model versed. Okay, so I don't know how to navigate these models. I didn't grow up gaming, so if you give me a model, I get lost. Okay. What is very easy here is most of us have used Google Street View, okay? So what we're able to do is to walk around in that building in the reality capture, because we can all do that, okay? And because the model we've uploaded is automatically aligned to the reality, it will follow me. I don't need to navigate the model will follow where I walk through in the virtual reality. But yes, that is the bouwkunde building, which we did go and capture. So we use the word capture very deliberately so that it doesn't get confused with scanning. So scanning is a process of putting a scanner here. We didn't have the plans of the building. We're going to do a scan to BIM. What OpenSpace can do is it can ingest point clouds. So once again, it's a space where visually all these things can come together. And if we can ingest scan data, point cloud, we are then able to start measuring from these photos, which is quite useful for anybody trying to remotely measure from what they're seeing on those things. And I think I have gone too far. Over to you, Suvaniya. Okay. I'll take my toys. Oh, clicker. No.
Hi everybody, Suvaniya from Baker Baines. So now we are busy with building or constructing the bouwkunde building. And during construction, we all have many different ways of communicating, especially when certain changes need to come about during the construction phase. And we really need to leave no room for interpretation in that sense. This is a couple of snippets from a funny video that we have where, you know, there's something that needs, some kind of change that needs to come about. So everybody uses different methods of communication, whether it's standing in front of each other, whether it's using a walkie-talkie, whatever the case is. But they start off by saying, tell Kevin we need to redo this wall. It moves into redesign the hall, moving over to demo it all, fire in the wrecking ball, and then eventually someone builds a waterfall. So, you know, that, in that sense, using too many devices in terms of the communication, sending a WhatsApp voice note, for example, can really leave room for interpretation. So now we have all of the data from the previous work stages, we have all of the documentation, and we're making the assumption that we've got everything that we need to actually now construct this building. And while we are constructing this building, we need to think about construction monitoring, like Jaco said, in terms of open space, but there's other devices that we can use to monitor our construction, whether it's LiDAR scanning, whether it's drones, but essentially we need to monitor it in some way so that when changes come about, we can accurately ascertain what those repercussions are in terms of those changes that are coming about. So in that, it will bring about construction verification, where we now verify what was originally designed, what was the intention, versus now what is being built. And by using something like a LiDAR scanner or a laser scanner, that is going to give us an accurate representation, a visual representation of what is being built on site versus what we originally designed. And then we can course correct. And we can say, okay, this is the impact of this, you know, we need to adjust a little bit. This is the kind of impact it has, whether it's minor, whether it's major, but it gives us an informed decision. And with that, in terms of all of the documentation, the communication devices, we will have quality inspections in relation to the management of the construction phase. So managing all of this data in terms of how we do our inspections, how it is shared, who is involved in the project, and who has visibility over that needs to be managed in one space. So from a digital point of view, having access to all of that information will give everybody access to the same information, giving you one source of truth throughout the whole project. And Richard, do you want to introduce? Okay, so now we've done the construction, and now we're moving over into closeout and handover. So based off of this, you know, we've got all of the data, we've got the constructed building, and now we're taking it and we're going to hand it over to the client or facilities management and say, here, this is yours, this is what you asked for, and you know, this is how we're going to deliver it back to you to then manage. So in this stage, we will start moving over from the project information model to the asset information model. And this is where the client will get all of the data that has been collected and, you know, managed over the entire life cycle of the project to be handed over. So the documentation, the graphical and the non-graphical data, all of the models to go into handover, operation, and then to be used. And in terms of the data that we are handing over, so that will include, you know, turnover documentation, commissioning in terms of the assets that are being handed over, what was installed on site, and any defects that needed to be resolved on site, how those were resolved, so that the client or the facilities management, the operator, can see all of that data more accurately. And based off of this, ultimately, when we hand over that turnover documentation or all of the collated information, that it meets the information requirements that were defined at the start of the project. So we, like Richard said, we need to keep checking that all of this meets the requirements. We need to keep checking that we're adhering to all of the requirements that have been outlined in the project. And then ultimately, deliver accurate as-builts. That would be first prize, to deliver that to the client. And all of this needs to be done in a common data environment so that everybody can have access, and especially the client rather, can have access to the structured information that was set out for the entire project that has been collected, that they can then use now, and they can find 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much. So, quick show of hands, who has got a new car in the last 6 months? Oh, congratulations. In the last year, a new car? Well done, that's awesome. So, when you got a new car, you got a user manual, I hope. Did you read it? You probably didn't, but the first time you needed to put in petrol, you weren't quite sure how to do that and where that lever was. Was it under the dashboard? Is it next to your seat? The same thing happens when you get a building. When you are given this building, when the client gets this amazing building, they get a bunch of things, right? They get information about the building, they get a bunch of keys, quite a few bunches of keys, and then they said, good luck, cheers, bye, enjoy your building. Studies show that it takes, on average, the building owner takes on average 6 months for a small building to 2 years for a big facility to really get to know that building properly. And in that time, the building isn't actually working nicely. So some of you may have been early tenants in a new building, like even a new residence or a new apartment block, in those first couple of months, the aircon smells funky. Things don't work as they're expected. The security system goes on the blink. The alarm goes off at weird times. It's because the guys operating the building don't know what they're doing. Well, they're very smart people, but they don't have the knowledge of that building. They didn't build it. Who of you knows what's behind this wooden panel? None of you. Of course you don't, because you didn't build the building. You've never been behind there. And so the handover documentation that we've just had a look at is intended to give you a jump start. If you're a building owner, if you're involved in the facilities management and the operations, that information is your textbook on how that building is supposed to work. And the people who know how it's supposed to work is that team, because they designed it, they planned it, they took the decisions, and they put the drawings together, and the contractor, because he actually built it. Now, your building is starting to operate. You're going to need information, just like the rev counters in the car, to see whether your building is working well or badly. And so we're into the final straight of operations, and Claudio is going to tell us some ways in which information can help operate better.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Claudio Duarte. I'm working for a company called Esri. But before I get into that, because you've heard enough acronyms today, I'm just going to give you two more. Well, BIM we all know of, but the other one is GIS, right? So this concept of geospatial information, what is a digital twin, right? A representative of something physical now in the virtual space. But how these two complement each other is the BIM will give you the physical characteristics, right? But with the GIS, that gives us the context of where does it actually fall within. So in this example over here, you can see the BIM would give us all the dimensions, all the materials, what is the bridge actually made of, versus the GIS, where does it actually fall in the real world, right? Is how high, how low is the topography in the area, those type of things. Right, so I think very simply, if you want to put them side by side, the BIM is going to give you the content, right? This is the building, so you've gone through this whole stage, it's been designed, built, all that type of thing. Now it's handed over to the operations manager or to the client themselves. The GIS, which is the Geographic Information System, is just a common space, and there's many methods out there. This is just one of the methods in which you can bring it all together, kind of a one-stop shop. And why do we want to do this? We can see the amount of inefficiencies in retrieving data, right? How does an operations manager go look back? What is the intended design? What are the materials used? All these different pieces of information collected. How do we have access to that in a single space, right? So that is giving you context. Never mind the building, around the building, the surrounding, the natural and built environment. What does that look like? What other parts are we not considering or should be considering? Right, so one of the offerings, which is through the web browser, so through mobile phone or probably best on a desktop or laptop, we kind of get two views, right? So on the left-hand side, this is what we call our geographical space, right? So we have our 3D buildings. So there's actually been a scan done to see the relative height of each one. We've got different parts. Where's our road network, electric network, water pipes, all these different types and pieces. But a key thing here is in the geographical view, it allows you to get to where you need to be, right? So how do you quickly look up the Odendaal building as an example, just by searching in the bar, actually navigating to where it is. On the right-hand side, that is kind of a view of any relevant information that has been grouped together. So show me the 3D model of the building, right? So what we're actually seeing on the right-hand side is one of the Revit files, right? This is actually the intrinsic design of it. But maybe I wanted to see the floor plan as well. So if I had this up interactively, as I click on the building, it kind of gives me a drop down of attachments of every kind of piece of information that is relevant to that, right? So now you can start piecing together why it's so important through all these parts, all the data, all the different formats, everything that has been collected. How can we group it? So almost delivering to who's going to now operate the building, that they can get as much information as possible, because the more information we have, the more informed decisions we can make at the end of the day. Right, so as an example, if I was an operations manager, never mind the building, how does this interact with the rest of the environment around, right? So safety is going to be a very important consideration. Never mind within the building, where are the positions of all our fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, those type of things. How do we actually plan out a evacuation plan, right? How long can we simulate? Is it going to take to get from point A to point B? That now you can see the importance of, never mind the building, the internals, externals, but how does that interact and behave within the context of the university or city or whatever scale you want to look at it. So bringing it a bit closer to home, as an operations manager, we want to move a bit away from reactive maintenance to something more like proactive maintenance, right? So one of the tools that we do have is just a mobile, think of a smart form, right? That you can actually go and collect information, so do your asset inspection or maintenance procedures with. So what does this look like, right? So from an operations manager, I know what my building looks like inside and out. I can see the greater context of what's around the building. I can start setting up maintenance procedures, as in go inspect a certain valve. Have our fire extinguishers been replaced on a yearly basis as they are mandated to, right? But how do you get this information back? Because one of the biggest gaps we see in operations, and this is in all types of fronts, is getting that information back. So people are doing their work, they're checking, they're fixing, they're doing what they need to, but is this information coming back? Is it painting the same picture that the manager, the decision makers need at the end of the day? So over here, just a small view, but what has actually happened is someone has made the decision of what needs to be inspected, so they've gone and plotted and actually selected through all the different data formats collected. This is the piece of equipment that needs to be collected, or inspected rather. Then through the field, when I actually navigate to that device, I'm able to collect information about that, right? So now you can see this information is going to stream back to this, where we can see how many inspections have been completed, that type of thing, attach photos. So you can do a bit more work management around it, but why this is quite important, it's going to help you with either your building operation management, or even at a grander scale, your campus operational management. Right, so I think above and beyond that, those that do know what a GIS is about, a geographical information system, as I explained to my grandmother once, because she's a fan of Shrek, it's like an ogre, it's got lots of layers, right? So same thing with geography. You can choose how many elements you want to see. So on this map, we're seeing a picture, but there are different elements saying signage, security cameras, fire extinguishers, entrances, toilets, right? All of these are grouped in layers, if you want to call it. And with that, you can turn it on and off based on what you're asking of the building, of the situation, right? So specifically to utility maintenance, this is quite key, because you can start, as we saw, there's electrical, there's water, there's mechanical. You can turn on and off different views of your building so that you can start being reactive around it, actually collecting maintenance information and actively tracking and tracing what is going on so that you can operate that building for as long as possible. All right, so final part from this is, I think all in all, as well, which we see is quite important, what's meaningful is because you're tracking and tracing within a digital format, obviously the information retrieval, that is quite efficient, right? So if I quickly just at a glance want to see how many pieces of equipment, maybe there's a mandate that the life cycle is up and we need to replace the whole lot of whatever piece of equipment there is, all the lights, change them to LEDs. We can holistically see how many are there going to be. We can put a price to that so we can get an estimate of what it's actually going to cost. But there can also be a rollout plan, right? So you can think of someone actually going, replacing a whole floor, capturing this information, putting it back. Now you're giving that active living mechanism to the building, to the space at hand. Thank you.
So I'm going to go straight into what happens next. The interesting thing about this entire process and what's different to traditional design and construction is this happens in one digital environment together. This is not an environment where we hand over paper. This is not an environment where we make decisions without each other in the room. This is not an environment where someone is in charge without someone else listening. Information is handled as a team. Information is handled as a single model, even though there's many scales of model from fire extinguisher to city. It's one digital environment. The images we show are just representations of that digital information environment. But let's fast forward a little bit, and we want to complete this project. Let's fast forward 50 years into the future, We've run the building for 50 years. We have our digital twins in our synchronized worlds. Our information is consistent. We're perfect. We're not, but we are. And long story short, at some point, this project is becoming meaningful beyond its operations. It is a heritage building. It has significance. It has to, it reaches the end of its life. And there's a couple of ways that buildings and projects reach the end of their lives. On the one side, we'd like to maintain, keep, and have legacy projects that last longer. We do heritage BIM for that. And on the other side, we might say this project has reached the end of its life. It's ready for deconstruction, decommissioning, etc. And this is where we enter BIM stage 8. And this is a whole new world that the globe is going into. It's not just the project space, but also the BIM space of how do we keep information going beyond the life of the building, and how do we take care of decommissioning buildings. So our clicker today. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. The point of this simulation is just to expose you to the typical project world of BIMing through these stages. There's a lot more to learn. It's helping you to prompt about these ideas. But imagine if this building is to reach a point where we are at the end of its life, and you have no information about it. Zero. In effect, it means you'll have to redesign that whole project, reverse engineer all the decisions, capture all information again to get to this point. And in Africa, with a bigger picture, and the 80% of buildings yet to be built, we have an opportunity to avoid that mistake by thinking of the heritage and decommissioning process now. That whatever you design in your built environment, project space, bridges, buildings, roads, dams, forests, trees, parks, cities, someone else in 50 years is going to inherit your decisions and information. And how are you going to make sure that it's easy and convenient and practical for them to do? Heritage BIM, stage 8 BIM, is going to be an emerging field. Well, it's already an emerging field, but it's going to be a very important part of the built environment professional space now and forevermore as we make and maintain buildings. Last year we covered a case study on this as we're experimenting with it in the university, so I would love you to go and look at that. I'm not going to go into detail, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Now, imagine now we've decided we are either keeping or throwing away our building. We're entering the final stage of what a building's life would look like. And stage 9 of BIM is where we ultimately, as good practitioners with strong morals and ethics, would like to be. As right now, the world throws away 100% of all building stock goes to landfill. 100% of our buildings. And this is just irresponsible. And if we are sitting in Africa with 80% of buildings yet to be built, and we're not thinking of how we're going to maintain the end of life of buildings and decommissioning, we're doing very irresponsible work as professionals. And BIM stage 9 is where I hope we all get to with our new building stock, infrastructure and everything coming online, is thinking about how we're going to circulate information and material back so that we build regenerative cities in Africa, not just landfills. So while we're not at stage 9 yet, it is very important to think of that information of what you're giving the model, and the decisions that go with that information. How are you designing your buildings and your projects so that they can be circular and that you're not just throwing all cities into landfills? And BIM is the only way that we will be able to get there. Because unless we capture information well, unless we store and keep and maintain information about buildings and cities well, we're going to have to redesign everything from scratch in order to circulate and not build trash heaps out of cities. So I'm asking you that when you design and build buildings, and when you design and build information about buildings, that you think about that responsibility in 100 years and how we could be building regenerative cities in Africa. That is our biggest opportunity. So as we go along into the future, and we talk about technologies, we talk about BIM, which is a process, it's not technologies, it's a way of working together, it's a way of being responsible for decisions now for 100 years in the future. The only way that we can do better in Africa than anywhere else is to work towards circularity in the built environment. And we're the only continent that can do that. We're literally the only continent that can do that. And it starts with information management about the built environment, or BIM. Without that ethic as a community, we're just going to create trash heaps out of cities. And I don't want to live in that world. So while we're doing professional speaking and we're showing you a project space, and we're going to move into the career space after the break, I want you to really think deeply about what it means to work in the built environment, how you're spending your time, and how you're spending your service of your time towards other people.